Good afternoon. My name is Casey Kennedy. I am the Communications Coordinator for the Town of Plymouth. With me today, I have the Director of Public Health, Keane. Today, we want to reach out to the community and kind of review what has been going on with bird flu in town, answer any outstanding questions the town might have, maybe disseminate some potential misinformation, and just give as timely updates as possible to the community. So what I'm going to start with is, if you have questions for myself or Director Keane, please add them into the chat. We're going to answer them as they come in, and I will unmute. But we were going to start with just some overview information, and then, as I said, please add your questions, and we'll open up that dialogue and communication.
Great. Thanks, Casey. Hello, everybody. I'm Keane, Director of Public Health for the Town of Plymouth, and as Casey said, we're here today to talk about the situation happening here in Plymouth, and not just Plymouth, but all over the state of Massachusetts currently in regards to bird flu or potential bird flu or a presumptive positive bird flu. So one of the questions that we wanted to address right away is, what is avian flu? Because you're going to hear some different titles for that situation. So you might have heard avian influenza, bird flu, H5N1. We're all talking about the same thing. We're talking about a situation that's happening with mostly waterfowl here in Plymouth, and then we'll go into more detail later. How is bird flu spread? Also a common question that we're hoping to answer right now. Bird flu is spread by mucus, through saliva, through excrement, through birds. It is spread a little differently from birds to cats and dogs. We can get into that a little bit later. We say non-negative, and that comes up a lot too, like, why are you saying non-negative? Why aren't you just saying we're positive for bird flu? The reason for that is there's only one lab in the United States that is authorized to issue a positive bird flu determination. It takes weeks to get that result back. But based upon the lab results that we have from the birds that we've already tested, combined with the way that the birds are acting and the way that they are dying on the water and around the water shoreline, we are going with a presumptive positive or a non-negative. People have been asking, why do we continue to say non-negative? Well, we say non-negative because there's only one lab in the United States that has the authority to issue a true positive determination for avian flu. We have sent samples out to that lab. We have not received them back yet. It could take weeks before we get those results back. However, based upon what we can visually see, the way the birds are acting, and other symptoms that the birds are showing, we are going with, and combined with the non-negative test results, we are going with the assumption to move ahead treating this as it was a case of avian flu. Another question that comes up often, especially around the Billington Sea area, is why have the birds not been removed from the ice? So I just want everyone to know that representatives from Mass Wildlife and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, as well as people here who work for the town of Plymouth, have gone out to the Billington Sea site as recently as Friday, yesterday, and they're back there today to evaluate the situation with the ice. Currently, it is still considered too dangerous for people to leave the boat, because they would have to leave the boat, go onto the ice to remove the birds that are stuck on the ice. So currently, that is still too unsafe of a situation for them to go onto the ice. And that's why you're still going to see, unfortunately, birds that cannot be reached and removed. So that kind of goes over a little bit of the preliminary information that we wanted to share. So now we're more than happy to go ahead and answer some questions for people who have joined us.
Yeah, so thank you for that good information. So one of the first questions is, can you comment on risks from dairy cows?
Okay, great question. Being followed extremely closely by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, because there is a situation where dairy cows can be infected with H1N1 and it can be passed through the milk. The good news is, currently in the state of Massachusetts, there is no incident of that whatsoever. But also good news is the Massachusetts Department of Public Health is monitoring that continuously, and we'll keep you posted if anything should change.
All right, we have another question. So sorry, they're coming in. So give me 1 second to go back. If a resident has a bird feeder, should we stop filling it to avoid spread? Which is a great question.
It is a great question. So there's a couple of things we can think about there. If you want to leave your bird feeder up, we recommend that you use gloves and that you use a mask if you have one when you're either cleaning your bird feeder or changing the feed over as a precaution. I would certainly not use a bird feeder if you live close to a water body that may have waterfowl, because you don't want to encourage any type of gathering of waterfowl, because that's how the virus is spread. But if you live away from the shore and you're hoping to continue to feed your songbirds, I would say that's okay, as long as you personally take precautions when, again, changing the feed or cleaning the feeder, because you don't know if an infected bird has been a visitor.
And the precautions include wearing PPE. So
yeah, they should wear a mask. They should wear gloves. Ideally, especially if they have domestic cats, because it's very susceptible to domestic cats. Perhaps wear booties on your shoes when you go outside, or take the booties off and dispose of them. Or if you don't have booties, leave your shoes in your garage or outside on your steps before you come into your house where your cat might be.
And all of that is, you can find at your local, like, CVS or
Absolutely.
Target.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Awesome.
Hardware stores have them too.
Wonderful.
Home
Thank
Depot.
you.
Yep.
So another question, as you mentioned, dogs and cats may contract bird flu differently. Can you elaborate? So this person had a dying bird on their porch. They live near a pond and they do have dogs. So can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely.
Please.
And the number one thing I'm going to say here, folks, is please do not let your animals go off leash. Please do not let them free range or roam any area right now currently. That's the best way to keep your animals safe. Because if you let your dog roam freely and he comes back with a bird in his mouth, there's no way to determine how long that bird's been there or what that dog might have been doing with that bird prior to bringing it back to you. So we encourage you, as always, to have your animals leashed so that you can, if they happen to pick up a bird, it's well within your sight, so you know that that bird's just been picked up and dropped by your animal. So there's really no cause for concern at that moment for that disease to be spread to your dog. Cats, it's a little different. It's very susceptible to cats. So that's why we're encouraging people, if you have outdoor cats, temporarily make them indoor cats. Keep them close to you. Keep them in your sight if they have to go outside. Don't let them just free range, because if a cat does pick up a bird and eats any part of that bird or carries that bird in its mouth for a long period of time, there is a situation that might occur where that virus can be transferred to that cat. And we don't want that to happen to any of our domestic animals.
Thank you.
Sure.
So what species of bird and other wildlife have been impacted so far?
Waterfowl has been greatly impacted. It's spreading through waterfowl, so that would be geese, ducks, swans. We haven't seen any incidences of it with any type of songbirds. However, I will make a little caveat with that, because we're encouraging people, if they have any dead birds or animals on their property, to contact my office or animal control, and we will have animal control go out and remove those birds or animals from your property. Usually, if someone calls with a songbird being dead on their property, we give you the instructions on what to do to remove that bird yourself. We do not send animal control out. But in light of the situation that's happening currently in Plymouth, and to really err on the side of caution, we're allowing anyone with any type of bird that's dead on their property to call, and animal control will be happy to remove it for them.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question, where else in town beyond Billington Sea have there been presumed positive incidents with multiple birds?
Billington Sea is the number one area where we're seeing multiple birds. We did have a situation when we had a backyard flock that was a little south from Billington Sea that they were exposed to the virus. But again, that flock was allowed to free range. They most likely went off their property and mingled with the bird that had avian flu or were sick, and then brought it back to the rest of the flock So that's the other situation that we had that had multiple birds. Other than that, we're just seeing like ones or twosies with songbirds that we're going and pick up.
And speaking of the spread, I know one of the things that we've been advised by the state and why we want to leave it to, the town and the state officials for removal is how it can spread. And that's
right.
If you want to go into that.
Absolutely. One of the things that we really want people to know is, I know people want to do the right thing and they want to help, right? And a lot of people have said, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to go into Billington Sea and I'm going to collect them and I'm going to bring them back. Sometimes one of the worst things you can do is actually move a sick bird, because when you're moving that sick bird, that virus is moving with the bird. So we strongly encourage folks not to take this into their own hands, but to notify us, and we'd be more than happy to go and take a look at the situation. The animal control officers have been working 7 days a week, going to all the locations. We have been successful so far in getting the animals the same day that we get a phone call about them. So.
Awesome. Thank you. So here in Plymouth, we have a lot of residents who are backyard chicken farmers.
Yes.
So for those folks in town, is there a time frame for risk? When can they potentially free range again? Because I know that's very important.
Okay, so a couple of things to think about. The virus loves cold weather. And we've been having cold weather here in Plymouth, and in Massachusetts too. So usually the season ends in April. The avian flu season ends around April. With this continuation of cold weather, the virus is probably very happy right now here in Plymouth and in the surrounding areas. So to my backyard farmers, what I would highly encourage you to do is not allow your flocks to free range. If you have another neighbor next door that also has chickens, and I know people like to have them sort of, combine, mingle with each other, and then separate again at the end of the day, I would highly encourage you not to do that for the time being, because this virus is so contagious. I would just hate to see several flocks get sick because they were mingling with each other. It's best to keep everyone separate. Very similar, like I said, when we were at COVID. When we went through COVID, one of the biggest things we said was, don't go into groups.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because that's how it spreads. It's the same thing here. Keep your flock separate, so we're not mingling with different flocks where the risk increases.
Wonderful. Thank you. Risk to other aquatic life. Is there a risk of bacteria in the water long term because of the dead and decaying birds, which I know is a big scare?
So I also, great question. And it's a wonderful time to remind people that this is not the first time that we have had avian flu, but it is the first time that we've had ice in the areas where the birds remain. So in the past, when we've had avian flu, the birds who are sick will die and they'll sink to the bottom of whatever water body that they're on, and no one sees them. This particular case, it's very sad, very concerning, because it's very visible. The birds are dying and they're sick, and we can see them because they're on ice. So no, there is no indication that any illness is transferred to other types of animals or sea life or pond life, like frogs or fish or anything like that. And again, it's happened before, but this time it's different because it's so visible.
Yeah. Thank you. So to follow up with that, this person would also like to know, which is a great question, will there eventually be testing to our bodies of water? Will the Board of Health determine if and when the waters are safe to enter?
Absolutely. That is a great question. These are all great questions, actually. So thank you so much for everyone who's joining us. That's a great question. And yes, we will be working with the Massachusetts Department of Public Health and the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. We will certainly be reaching out to them when it's time for people to start enjoying recreational activities on the bodies of water. And we will definitely ask them what the best thing is to do moving forward, for sure. Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you. Should we have residents remove bird baths if they live near the kettle ponds or bogs?
I would. I think right now, we should err, like I said, on the side of caution. And I would remove, if you live near a body of water like that, I would remove those items because it just encourages birds to flock to those. Birds like to take their little baths together. And that's what we're trying to avoid.
Awesome. And just letting everyone know, we just had a few more folks join us. So if you have any questions, please add them to the chat. We're going through in order. And if for some reason I miss a question accidentally, please re-enter it and we'll make sure we get to all questions. So, all right. Thank you again.
Sure.
All right. So we have an individual asking, the bird that we had on our porch was a sparrow. It was alive when we found it, but it didn't last long. So I guess not really a question, but sparrows still.
Right. Sparrows, robins, blue jays, currently not a concern with avian flu. In those cases, they may have been sick from something else. They may have flown into a window and unfortunately died from the impact of flying into the window. But that's why we are just erring on the side of caution, and we're still picking those types of birds up for our residents here in Plymouth.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then, sorry if I missed it, but just highlighting the trauma versus, what we're seeing is, if there's an animal that is clearly deceased due to a traumatic incident, getting hit by a car, those are a different situation, right?
They are different situations, but again, I would encourage everyone out there who does have a dead animal on their property to reach out to us, because we can still go out there and we can make that determination and we can still remove that animal. We have had a situation where we had a coyote who definitely was deceased because they tried to hop a fence and didn't quite make it. So they died from trauma. But we got the phone call, we sent animal control out, and they removed the animal. So that we may go back to the way that we've always done it once this subsides. But for the time being, until further notice, we will go out to remove any bird or animal.
Yep. And just highlighting, shout out to our animal control.
Absolutely.
Because they have been nonstop to the best of their ability. There's 3, I think, of them, and doing round-the-clock removal along with the state. So thank you to your staff of the animal control.
Yes.
So looping back in, you might have already answered it, but I'm just going down. Will the disease contaminate the water?
There's no indication that it's ever that avian flu has ever disseminated to a body of water, to the actual water. But again, Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection and Massachusetts Department of Public Health, along with officials here in Plymouth, will continue to reach out to those state officials to ask them, as we move through this flu season, would it be appropriate to test the water? There's no indication right now that there's anything wrong with the water, nor has there ever been anything wrong with water in past avian flu situations. But we will keep in constant contact with our state officials with that.
Wonderful. Thank you. If I have a dog or a cat and we think they might be infected, what should I look out for?
Okay, absolutely. And this is such a great question, and I've shared this information with a couple of people who have called. Without hesitation, if you think your dog or cat is acting ill or not the way your dog or cat usually acts, please reach out to your veterinarian. Let them know that we are having what we believe to be a serious case of avian flu in Plymouth. Your dog might have got out. He was out of your sight for a little bit of time, and you're concerned he's not feeling well right now, and then let the vet give you the next set of instructions.
Wonderful. Thank you. Should a private well be tested, and how will the town notify an abutter about that?
Right now, we have no concern either for our public water supply or private water supply. Private water supply would be wells. The way that the depth of the water between the ponds and the wells does not give any room for any type of permeating. So we're not concerned about groundwater. I talked to the water department today. We're not concerned about any type of groundwater being impacted, and we're not concerned with anything that's happening with the town water either right now. So everything is good as far as the water is concerned.
Awesome. Thank you. It looks like that was the questions for right now. So we'll pause on the questions and kind of just go back to some stats. So the town has been putting out press releases as often as we have updates. So we put one out yesterday where we were able to highlight some important statistics that we have available to us regarding state removal efforts and also town removal efforts. So as of January 18th, when this became we were made aware of it. The state came out and was able to use Clean Harbors, which is contracted by state officials, Mass Wildlife. We're able to remove 55 deceased waterfowl. I believe some were not deceased. It was 55 total were removed that day.
Right. So there were some birds that were showing signs of illness, and there was a veterinarian on site, and they were very humanely euthanized on site because we didn't want them to suffer any further with the illness.
Yep. And then as of yesterday, January 28th, the state was able to remove 12 more waterfowl at Billington Sea. So that was the state numbers. For town numbers, from January 18th to January 27th, the Division of Public Health has received 202 calls and answered 202 calls.
Yes.
And the town of Plymouth has removed 32 total wildlife, 29 birds, and 3 other animals. As of yesterday, January 28th, the town received 17 more calls and 4 birds were safely removed. So I just want to highlight that as we're removing numbers that are safely able to be removed. We are very well aware of the deceased birds on Billington Sea, and it is devastating. It's very sad. But it's safety, human safety comes into play due to the ice. I know you had stated at the beginning, but we had some folks join us. So I just want to reiterate that we are aware, we do empathize with the neighborhood that has to see it every day. It's an awful sight. It's very sad.
Yes, I mean, I've been there myself, several times, and it's very sad. I just want to remind people that we are there every day evaluating that situation. Mass Wildlife is there evaluating the situation, removing any birds that they can get to safely. But as soon as they believe that ice is safe to go onto, the situation is not, some people have said, well, they have a boat. They do, and that is correct.
Yeah, the ice boats, correct?
Right.
Ice boats, yeah.
But there are still several birds out there that they would have to leave the boat, go onto the ice, and then chip away at that ice to remove the bird. And that's the part where we say that's putting someone in peril, in human risk. So that's where we're looking for that ice to diminish a little bit more so that can be done safely.
Yeah. And I've said it written it in several press releases, and you've kind of highlighted is the safety reason is the environmental factors. And that's what we mean when we say that the state and the town are monitoring the environmental and the ice conditions, because if we have a 40-degree day and the ice begins to melt, that's a positive if it continues to melt, but then it refreezes. So we need to make sure that the ice is either melted enough to bring a boat out to remove them, because then they can stay in the boat and actually take the deceased waterfowl because they will be unfrozen.
Correct.
Or the ice needs to be thick enough for someone to be able to, and we just haven't.
Right, when we haven't hit the sweet spot quite yet for safety, right?
Again, we understand why it's awful to see, but that putting a human life at risk is just not an option, unfortunately. So, fortunately. So we have several other questions. Let me admit a few more folks into this. All right, so back to the water.
Yes.
Do we know, or will we eventually have an update about being able to go in or on the water in the spring? And will the town be testing for bacteria in the spring?
I don't know the answer about testing because, again, the flu has never gone into water up until this point. As I definitely will reach out to the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, talk to the state epidemiologist, ask what the best course to take would be, because of course we want the water to be safe for our residents and our visitors, absolutely. So we'll be monitoring that as we get closer to that time.
Wonderful, thank you. And this is actually a great question. Can birds recover from bird flu?
No.
Oh. Well, that is...
No, unfortunately, that's why we euthanized those birds that were showing illness on the shore.
So there is no ability, like, for folks that think they might be able to, like, rehab them back? Okay.
No, there is no rehab, unfortunately. I know people have asked that question too. What happens is with this type of situation is impacts their brains swell. And that's why people who are seeing the birds that are sick might see them going around in circles over and over again, may see them shaking their head back and forth. That's the reason why. That's the part of their body that's being impacted, and there's no course of care to change that.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
So we did get a good question. So things are changing rapidly. We're getting new directive sometimes from the state.
Yep.
So we have a question from a resident. Are we, as the town, recommending that people remove dead birds themselves with double bagging a mass, then dispose of it? So if they have the proper PPE, are we going to be recommending that?
That's a great question. And a lot of people have reached out and said, we could help. And at this point in time, I appreciate the offer for assistance, but I would still prefer that we have our animal control officers come out and remove the birds. If you have birds on your property, please let us know, and we will make sure that we go out and we retrieve them for you. Though I do appreciate the offer, I think at this point it's best to leave that to the animal control officers.
Agreed. Thank you.
Not only that, but there are like Casey said, there are birds that are being removed by mass wildlife. So I think at this point we should let it continue in that direction.
Wonderful. Thank you. This is also a great question. Are abutting towns concerned with bird flu as well, taking similar precautions with dogs and cats, bird feeders near ponds, etc.?
Great question.
That is a great
And
question.
so many towns are being impacted by this awful situation. And they're reaching out to us, actually. They're reaching out to Casey. They're reaching out to myself and my office to get an idea of what we're doing, because, how we're getting information out there, what our plan is, who we're working with. Because, yes, unfortunately, this is in many, many Massachusetts municipalities at this time, including the city of Boston.
Wonderful. Thank you. Is Morton Park closed for walking?
Right now, we haven't closed any of our parks. We do have signage up that does advise folks that there is a non-negative case of avian flu, and to take precautions, to be careful. Do not go near a dead bird or animal. Do not go near a bird that you think is sick. And again, keep your animals leashed and close by you at all times. You can go for walks with your animals, but really keep them on a leash, because once they're out of sight, you don't know what they could be getting into, and that would be very unfortunate.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that, because I was going to bring that up. Because we do have a leach law, but I'm a dog owner, so I understand.
Yep,
Wanting my dog
to,
she's a hound, she wants to run free.
Yep.
But in this particular instance, we really want to keep our domestic animals safe as well as our wildlife. And if that means, leashing your dog so they don't come back with, parts of a carcass, or might have been sniffed, because it's respiratory as well for animals. For animals, it is. So you might be 100 feet away and you didn't see your dog sniffing a deceased waterfowl. So it's really crucial that you keep them on a leash in eyesight. So just really want to, because we
Absolutely.
love the dogs.
Even folks who don't live around what we would say, the ponds that might be impacted, because this is also what could happen. A sick bird could be picked up by a scavenger, a fox, a fish or cat, a coyote, and they could bring it back to where they live, which might be really far away from that body of water, but could be right near your backyard. So then you say, okay, I'm going to let my dog out, because I let my dog out all the time, and he keeps around the neighborhood, so that's okay. But now that scavenger has brought that dead animal into your neighborhood, that's become a safety hazard for your domestic pet. And that's what we're talking about too.
And actually, this popped into my mind, and I don't know if you have the answer, but actually some waterfowl don't even show symptoms. So a lot of people think, if you see them when they're kind of spinning and acting a little weird, but some might still be flying. So
absolutely,
this is actually spread through feces.
Right.
So if you think of geese, I live near a bog. I take my dog out near the bog, and there is goose feces all around.
Right.
So I think that's crucial to highlight, that you don't even want them sniffing that.
Correct.
And then that's also
Very
how it
good
could
point.
be spreading.
Absolutely.
So.
And that's what we're really saying. Keep them on leash, keep them close to you. So that's the best way to protect them.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So back to the questions. So are raptors such as osprey, eagles, owls at risk to the disease, and any suggestions, actions to protect them? So great question, because I was going to ask about the eagles.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we've had several phone calls about the eagles, and I've been concerned about the eagles as well. So I called Mass Wildlife and I asked this question. I said, in light of what's happening around Billington Sea, and we know that we have a few eagles, would we ever consider capturing them and keeping them safe and away from this situation while this is happening, while we're in this flu season? And I found the answer to be interesting and also very enlightening for me. Two things. One, it's exceptionally difficult, they said, to catch a healthy eagle. And the second thing is, if you are successful in doing that, the eagle can die from trauma. So they are going with the direction, to me, that leave them be. This is the better situation than trying to capture them where they're afraid they would just die from trauma.
Yep, which is very sad. So,
which the whole situation is very sad, but we're trying to do the best that we can for all species right now.
All right. So another great question. How do I give permission for Mass Wildlife to cross through my property to access the water / deceased birds?
Okay, so if the birds are in the water, Mass Wildlife will collect them if they're on the shore. So you can certainly send your address to me, and I can send that out to the folks at Mass Wildlife who will be on site. If they're accessible on shore, then you can also call the animal control officers, and we'll come and pick them up for you.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, let's see. Has there been evidence of, other wildlife such as foxes, coyotes, etc., dying from eating the sick birds and the deceased birds?
We have collected deceased animals, but they have not died from any type of impact from avian flu. They've died from other things, mostly trauma.
Yeah, unfortunate. So this is another great question. Well, like we said, they've all been great. But is theirs concern, because this should be a concern? This is a type of flu. Is there a concern that people could catch it? And if so, how are we trying to actively prevent this?
Extremely, extremely rare for humans to catch avian flu. The cases where humans have caught avian flu, they have worked in a poultry industry and were around large numbers of birds that were infected. There has been one death in the United States, not in this area. I believe they were in Louisiana. It was an older gentleman who worked on a large poultry farm who had other health conditions, but did contract avian flu when he did pass away. But it's extremely rare to be passed to a person who's not working in the poultry industry.
Yeah, and then like we have suggested in several communication efforts, and again, I will also be continuously updating residents with more press releases,
numbers,
more information, more numbers. We're going to try and get the numbers as often as we can. So the information will, be updated and changing regularly, but we're going to keep active with updating the community as well. So one of those is, the prevention measures, the PPE, the PPM, personal protective measures. So we had said one of those was, wearing gloves and a mask when cleaning your bird feeder.
And booties on your shoes if you can. And if you don't have the booties, and I mean the disposable booties that you kind of see if you see a surgeon, something like that. Take your shoes off, use a little bit of alcohol to clean the bottoms of your shoes.
Ethanol, 70%, that's all we need.
So you're not tracking that into your house. But I think it's important, just for a second, if we can, Casey, to go over the different ways we've tried to communicate all of this information to people.
Yeah.
You mentioned the website, absolutely. Press releases. We give an update to the Board of Selectmen. So if anyone watches the Board of Selectmen meetings on Tuesday nights, you'll get an update there. We have posted flyers. We talked about that. We've used all the electric signs that the DPW has that also say about avian flu and the numbers to call in order if you have any dead animals or birds. So you'll see those all throughout town. We've talked continuously to the Plymouth Independent to get information out. We're using our social media. We've posted signs on town-owned ponds and beaches. And we did a code red. So anyone who had signed up for code red, which is if you have a cell phone number and you want to get emergency information, we did a code red that talked about, and that was last Thursday. So just some ways that we're trying to get the word continuously out there. And of course, encouraging people with any questions. As you can see, we talked about the number of calls that we were receiving, but we encourage people to call because it's so imperative that you get correct information because sometimes incorrect information can spread quite rapidly.
Yes.
And so it's important that people get correct information because we don't want anyone to be concerned over something that may not be the actual case.
No, 100%. And going back to the code red alerts, those are great for anything. Anything emergency related, storms, any type of natural disaster, anything going on. So I will also post that phone number, or sorry, the form or whatnot to sign up for it.
Exactly.
So I will post, and I'm also going to read out the phone numbers that we've been highlighting, and I will add it to this chat as well for the folks that have joined us.
It's a great idea.
But if you have a concern, if you see deceased waterfowl that you would like to be removed, please call Karen's office, so her Director Keane's office, which is the Office of Public Health at 508-322-3339. Make sure I got all the threes.
You got it, yeah.
And then the Animal Control Office at 508-888-1186. And I'll also add it to the chat for the folks that are here.
And also, Casey, if I could just jump in a quick sec along this same avenue. We did get a release today, information from Mass Wildlife, also in conjunction with Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources and the Department of Public Health, state level. And they do recommend that if you come across sick or deceased birds, 5 or more found in a single location, that if you go to mass.gov/report birds, that's important because that's more of a flock situation, and that's something that we need to alert them to. Of course, you can always call my office as usual, and we can also relay this information to them. They also go on to say exactly what we said. They are really infected with avian influenza viruses. Only people who have direct contact with many infected animals are at risk. Their tips for the public, very similar to what we already talked about. Avoid handling birds and other wildlife. Keep your pets safe. They should be always leashed and away from wildlife. Cat owners in affected areas should keep their pets indoors, which we've already talked about. So, I don't think there's anything new here that I want to share that we haven't already. Okay, here's something interesting. For backyard farmers.
Oh, that was actually going to be a next question.
Okay,
So.
there is some new tips for livestock and poultry owners. Very important. Poultry owners should continue to practice strong biosecurity measures to keep their birds away from wild birds, i.e., don't let them free range or be with other flocks. They should also, if they have a water body on their property, take steps to eliminate any standing water that they can, so it's not attracting waterfowl to their location, which is what we talked about before about the bird bath.
Yes.
Same idea, right?
Okay.
If you have new birds that are going to be coming into your flock, they recommend that you completely isolate that new bird for at least 1 month prior to being added to your domestic flock. And limit the number of people that have access to your flock. It's just really important, I think, at times of this type of situation with avian flu, similar like it was with COVID and other diseases that can spread, is to keep your circle small. You know, the smaller your circle, the better, because as you can imagine, have different layers come into your circle, then the risk of exposure becomes higher. And again, if you share equipment, also a good point.
That's true.
Yes. If you share equipment, and I know a lot of our backyard farmers do, they share equipment amongst each other. If you do share equipment, if you still must share equipment, thoroughly clean and disinfect that equipment as it comes from one location to another. So I think that's some interesting tips.
And where can folks find that press? Was that a press release, or is that from the state?
This was the state officials. So it was from in conjunction with Mass Wildlife, which is masswildlife.news@mass.gov. MDAR, which is
Department of Agricultural Resources,
right, and then the Department of Public Health.
Awesome. So when we share this recording, I will post all the links to these sites to make this as easy accessible for folks. So I have a question. If I had, let's just say 10 chickens, and one of them seemed sick, can I isolate my said potential sick chicken from the rest of the flock, or do we assume the entire flock is
Unfortunately, the standard currently is that MDAR assumes that the entire flock has been infected and will have to be euthanized.
Okay, thank you. And also regarding backyard chickens, if they seem healthy, are the eggs okay to eat? Which is a great question.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. However, if you do want to purchase eggs, say from a farmer's market or from your neighbor next door, I would clean the eggs. Sometimes they have little feathers still on them, or little somethings from the coop when they were brought out. So I would certainly wash the eggs off before I utilize them.
Wonderful, thank you.
Minutes.
All right, let's see what we have here. All right, how long can avian flu survive on like porches, outdoor furniture, etc.?
It doesn't.
Okay, so any type of like furniture, we're good. So I know if you're like, we say PPE, clean, clothes, dispose of the PPE, but furniture's fine. If I had fabric?
Yes, you're
perfect.
If you have backyard furniture or something like that, no, it's different. I'm talking about your typical backyard furniture. If you have a backyard farm, I probably, and you have many chickens and perhaps other waterfowl, I probably would recommend covering any type of that furniture, only because it can,
until probably the spring.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Then we have someone who might have missed it earlier, but it can't hurt to reiterate.
Absolutely.
If you live on Billington C, do you suggest that those folks bring in their bird feeders? Because we don't want to attract.
Right. If you live around Burlington C, I'm going to say yes. And this is the reason why I'm going to say yes about bird feeders, because birds tend to go to a bird feeder sometimes with other birds. And so if we want to stop the spread of avian flu, we need to stop encouraging any type of flocking. So that's why we've talked previously about bird feeders and bird baths. If you don't live near Billington Sea or other large body of water where there'd be multiple waterfowl, then I would say yes, you can still continue to feed your songbirds. I would just take precautions, and when I mean precautions, I really do mean personal protection gear, meaning a mask and gloves. If you're going to change the feed in your bird feeder, or you're going to clean out your bird feeder because you don't know what guests you've had at that bird feeder.
Wonderful, thank you. So I think we're caught up on questions for now, so I'm just gonna jump back over here. So I know personally sometimes when something like this is happening, you're getting so much information from so many different sources, from multiple, as you just read, how
Right.
many state
Right.
departments or
Yep.
divisions were in one press release. So it can be a lot, and sometimes there's different verbiage that's used. So I just want to kind of highlight and review that there's going to be various ways of calling bird flu.
Absolutely.
So what we'll hear is avian influenza,
Yep.
which is actually HPAI.
Yep.
Highly pathogenic
Yes.
avian
Yeah,
influenza.
Yep.
So you'll sometimes see
Yep.
that written as
Yep.
HPAI. It's avian influenza, which also is shortened to avian flu. More commonly used, and what I believe we've been using more often, is bird flu, which is also can be labeled as, and correct me if I'm wrong, H5N1.
Correct.
So we've
All
got
correct.
various forms of calling
All correct.
one thing,
Right.
one thing.
Well, because avian does mean bird.
Yes.
So, we're not
We're
varying,
changing it,
We're not varying too
but-
much from what it actually does mean, but there are definitely terminology that's used.
I just know personally when I read something, sometimes it gets overwhelming when you're reading from one source and another source,
Absolutely.
and they're interchanging
Yep.
the verbiage that's
Yep.
using. So I just wanted to highlight that all of those mean the same thing. It's all
They do.
bird flu.
They do.
So you might see them being used interchangeably, especially throughout maybe the state correspondence.
It's funny you
I
should say
do.
that, 'cause
I tried to keep
Yes.
one to the best of my
exactly
ability.
what I was going to say, because you have to think about what is their direction,
Yeah.
right? What is their focus? So if I'm coming from a medical perspective, I'm using H5N1 because that's the medical terminology for avian influenza. If I'm coming from Mass Wildlife, I'm probably going to say avian influenza because that's the terminology that is used with Mass Wildlife. If I'm the general public, I'm probably going to see bird flu a lot because that's the terminology that people are used to. So what is the focus? It comes from what your affiliation is,
Yeah.
and that's why sometimes it can change. But they're all meaning the same thing.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's just important because, you know, as
Absolutely.
a person taking in information
Yeah.
and how much information is thrown at us at a daily basis, consistency is great, but sometimes when you're working with several partners and colleagues, it kind of, the wording gets changed a little bit. So just highlighting,
No, absolutely.
highlighting that.
And again, we'll reiterate it one more time because I think it's important. That's why you're going to see non-negative.
Yeah.
You're going to see preemptive positive, because we cannot say positive case because there's only one lab in the United States that can make that determination. They have the authority to do that. Those results aren't back yet. So
Thank you.
that's
I was
why
actually going to be the question. I was going to
Okay.
has
They're
it
not
been
back yet.
positively identified?
No,
by
it
a
could be
lab?
weeks.
Yeah,
It could be weeks.
and it's weeks because, like you just
There's only one, and
There's
it's
one.
across the whole country. It's not even just in Massachusetts right now. It's across the whole United States.
Yeah, so bird flu is rampant
Yes,
nationally.
it
So
is.
this one lab is getting it's
A lot.
Plymouth's all across the country,
Right, a lot.
technically.
Right,
So
it's a lot. I mean, they're working on it,
Yep.
constantly, but it's going to be a little bit of time before we get the actual result back from that lab.
and then as soon as we do, I will put out a press release. We
course,
will
yeah.
coordinate it
Yeah.
like immediately to the public once we have
But
those
I think
results.
it's important for folks to know too. The reason that we're doing all of this is because we are going with the. I don't want to say assumption, but I guess that is the best word at this point. That we are moving forward with all of the information that we need to send to everyone and all of the action that we need to take as a positive avian flu case, because the birds are certainly showing all of the symptoms of that. So in order to protect our residents, our visitors, our animals, our birds, we are moving in that direction.
Wonderful, thank you. So let's see if. So this is a good question as well. If a dog or cat, if they come down with bird flu, can they survive it, and is there a treatment?
Dogs, yes, most definitely. Dogs can recover from any type of bird flu, and again, I would reach out to your veterinarian for more specifics. But I will reiterate again, it is exceptionally dangerous for cats. It is very contagious for cats. In most cases, those cats do die. So it's really important that we keep an eye on our cats. And I know people have outdoor cats, and that's what they've always done, and that's the way that they live their cat life. But right now, I would strongly encourage everyone to keep all their domestic animals close.
Yeah, and specifically for cats, because I've actually have heard that same sentiment from someone. Well, my cat's an outdoor cat.
I know.
That's the only way they live. I've had a cat like that myself. Again, it's very rare for humans, but now you're thinking your cat has been out potentially playing with a carcass, because just because you don't see a gift brought back to your front porch does not mean.
Know.
So now you have, your cat walking through your home, cuddling with you on your pillow,
maybe
licking
your face.
And again, it's rare for humans, but we want to eliminate that potential completely, if possible.
Right. Oh, and I will also say one thing, if I could, Casey, just to jump in. Sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to remind people one of the best levels of protection you can take with any type of health situation is washing your hands thoroughly with warm water and soap.
Yes. And does it have to be I'm big on antibacterial soap.
It does not.
Does not.
If you want to use just your regular soap and some warm water and really wash those hands thoroughly, that's your best front line protection.
20 seconds, we're back to soap thoroughly. Perfect.
Yep.
Happy birthday twice.
Yes.
Sounds very familiar. So I think right now that's about what we have for questions, and we have about maybe roughly 5 minutes left. So if anyone has any last minute questions that they want to add to the chat, we appreciate the folks that joined live. I hope this was beneficial. I'm gonna repeat the phone numbers one more time. I did add them to the chat, but for anyone who might have joined later, to report any waterfowl that you might see deceased or struggling, please call our public health division or our animal control office. So for public health, it is 508-322-3339. And for animal control, it is 508-888-1186. And again, we will update the community once we have the results.
Absolutely.
Anytime we get new numbers from the state and from the town, from our own animal control officers, of removal efforts, we will get them out. We understand how awful it is to have to see it, especially for the residents at Billington, how awful it is to see the deceased waterfowl out there. But unfortunately, we're dealing with some weather conditions, the ice. It's not safe for a human at the moment to walk on the ice and safely chisel the bird out. So we do understand, we empathize, but we have to put human life.
And we know that people who live in that area live there because of the beauty of what they're living around. And right now it's not exactly what they want to see when they look out their window. So I would want to say I appreciate everyone's patience and understanding. And I really encourage, if you have any questions, to reach out to my office. Would be happy to answer any questions, because it's so vital that we get accurate information to all of our residents. So thanks.
And so just to kind of wrap up one more time, I will be sharing timely updates. We have the phone numbers that are also printed on the notice that has been posted throughout town, that I believe is also on the website. So all of the press releases are shared on our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, X. Also on the town website under Newsflash, you can scroll back, and I think the 6 press releases that we've done are all up there, and I will be continuously posting them up there. And then this meeting. So thank you all for joining and the questions. That was very helpful and great.
Yes.
We will get the recording out publicly. So the recording will also go on the town's website. It will go on the town's social media channels. The local scene, who thank you for having us today,
thank you,
will also be sharing it on their social media channels, also on the town's YouTube via the local scene, and also on our government channel, which I believe is Comcast 9 and Verizon 47. So that should be up hopefully by tomorrow. If there is any change in that, I'll be sure to update the public with when it will be available. So again, we want to thank everyone, and I appreciate the time and effort. So
thank you. Have a great afternoon.